Recorded live from the secret underground lair of Crimson Cowl Comics and Collectibles, this is the Crimson Cowl Comic Club Podcast.
The following issues may contain spoilers. School is no longer in session. I'm Anthony.
I'm Kirby.
And I'm Katie.
Welcome to the actual 327th episode of the Crimson Cowl Comic Club Podcast. In the last episode in the feed, we had a creator guest of Ara Marcone as well as Mr. David Gloyd. We had them talking about their books that they released at the West Bend High School's Comic-Con, talking about the creation and all that fun stuff. So if you're listening to this proper episode of the Comic Club, make sure to check that one in the feed over on the YouTubes and the internets and the iTunes and all that fun stuff. So here we go. We are going to jump into the proper issue 327, which is only going to be for weekly reviews. That's where we go back and forth and talk about the books that we've been reading, whether they're new, whether they're old. We're going to talk about them there. So let's jump into the weekly reviews. First up for the weekly reviews, I've been very excited for this one. Continuing on with the Universal Monsters, they've been doing the 4-issue miniseries of with Dracula and Frankenstein, Creature from the Black Lagoon. That one being the one I was most anticipated for. But this one, even more so because of the creative team. We are talking about the Universal Monsters The Mummy, issue number 1. Award-winning creator Faith Erin Hicks, who I've talked about on this show many a times through her graphic novels, presents a stunning new vision of the seminal horror film like you've never seen before. Helen Grosvenor is a woman born to two worlds and belonging in neither, forever haunted by a cursed encounter as a child, when unknown voices bring her back to an Egyptian dig site from her past. Helen will unknowingly play an unexpected role in the rise of a monster known only as the Mummy. This is done writing and art by Faith Erin Hicks. Colors, I believe colors. Let me just double check. Yep, by Lee Loridge, and then letters by Hassan Atsmain Alao. So yeah, this one, while I didn't have any special attachment to the Mummy in particular, this one I was coming in because of the creator, Faith Erin Hicks, who is most knownly for a lot of like young adult, slice of life type of graphic novel work. Like I said, I've talked about her work many a times here on this show. She's one of those authors and artists that I see her name in a graphic novel in the previous catalog. It's an instant buy regardless of what it is. One of the most recent ones I talked about, probably last year, beginning of this year, was the Hockey Girl Loves Drama Boy or something like that. It was one of those graphic novels that was very fun. But yeah, this is a crazy left turn into the world of the Universal Monsters of the Mummy. So what she does very well, once again, with young adult and slice of life, we are following young Helen here, and we are going back to the year of 1912, and we learn that her husband's from the UK, her mother is from Egypt, and talking about the synopsis where she's coming from two different worlds that she's born into, but not really feeling like she fits into either one of them. But we see her watching as her dad's kind of running this big historic dig in the desert as they want to dig up the past so they can kind of learn about the past. And they go into a tomb and they go through the artifacts and the books, and this is just like the opening title page to kind of see the tease where we get into the Mummy stuff here. But this story does strictly concentrate on this brand new character, Helen. We went from the beginning of 1900s and we jumped quickly over to 1921 as we now see her. She's in her she's a teenager. She's out there having fun with friends. They're all hanging out. She's trying to trying to find a place with this group, and the disconnect is that all of her quote unquote friends are essentially the children of the people that work for her dad. So they all look at her very differently, knowing that her father is essentially the boss of their parents, and they don't really feel too much connection with her. Maybe she's trying too hard to fit in with the group, but it leads into an interesting little trip where they want to leave this party that she had gotten them into in order to run out into the desert. This is all just within the opening pages. They run out to the desert, and while that's happening, that guy that was on that opening page is going through the artifacts and basically realizes that he knows how to kind of transcribe or translate the ancient text, which is kind of leading an interesting effect to our young character Helen and where she passes out. And once again, this is still the opening, so I think this is where I'll kind of leave it with the teaser. So, as young Helen is passing out because of somebody nearby reading this ancient text, we also see the mummy awakes. So, here it is. That is kind of the opening page setup. It doesn't waste any time to kind of jump into it. I thought that Faith Erin Hicks, with her background of the young adult fiction, you can definitely see her bring her specific flair into this. She goes along in the back matter, talking about her association with horror movies and kind of what led her to kind of getting excited to this book. And I thought it was a real interesting take on bringing somebody from that genre, one genre of comic book storytelling, to like a horror genre and kind of finding a middle ground. And this issue definitely explores a lot with Helen to begin with, much like a lot of the other monster books that have come out, especially with like the Creature one, because that one's more current in my memory. Where, at least with this first issue, there's very little mummy stuff in there. There's a lot of lore that's being built. I think it leads to a lot of exciting. I think there is another issue out. I've yet to read it, but I think there's a lot to explore with this. And because I'm so attached to the creator, I'm obviously on for the ride. But I could also see the disconnect of some people just feeling like, all right, what's this whole extra story here? It might not feel like a classic Universal monster type of thing, but I think it's a real interesting modern look at something that's still being told about the 1920s. So yeah, it's a real promising start. I'm excited to see how this pans out, especially with the young girl's connection back on that ancient you know desert dig, archaeological dig that they were doing, and how it affected her as a teen when the tomb was unearthed. So, yep, that is all I can say so far for the Universal Monsters. The Mummy #1, great start. I'm excited for the other three. Kirby?
Yeah, I was able to read the first one, and it actually pulled me in right away because
Oh, cool.
I was disappointed with Dracula. I want to reread it and find out why. I just felt like it was too close to the original story,
Yeah, yeah.
whereas the other three were so wonderfully done and just you got so much extra from it. And that one definitely looks like it's going to be a fun story in the long run. But I checked out Godzilla versus Spider-Man, and I do have Godzilla vs. Hulk, but I couldn't remember if someone else was getting it. And in case they read it, I figured I'd read the second issue. And they're all standalone one shots, but it does start out here talking a little bit about the Godzilla vs. Hulk issue before this. But you get symbiote Spidey in this storyline. You know it's going to cause havoc with the symbiote tending to bounce from character to character and stuff like that. But we see he is still with the Black Cat in this storyline with his relationship. He has issue with the Shocker that he has to deal with, and as that's all happening, all of a sudden Godzilla appears, and is coming out of the water, ripping the place apart. And so Spidey and the Shocker are like, okay, we're gonna pause for now, put the fight on hold, and then we'll get back to our fun later. And the Shocker's like, oh yeah, okay, I'm up for that. And what does Spidey do? He webs them up, leaves them hanging with a note for the cops. Like, didn't let him go off, didn't let him try and help with Godzilla or anything like that. But then he notices that Godzilla is going towards a certain building, and it happens to be where Peter Parker's apartment is. And Mary Jane just so happened to appear in town on vacation or whatever, and she's hanging her head out the window, and Peter's got to get up there and save her. And while this all happens, uh, well, of course, Black Cat appears, and Black Cat and Mary and Jane have their fun little banter back and forth throughout the rest of the story. But Godzilla does his roar, and it basically rips the symbiote right off of Peter. And the symbiote freaks out and just disappears, and eventually ends up starting to climb on Godzilla, and we get Symbiote-Zilla, which is, I mean, that's like an ultimate creation. And the thing those two combined could do, but Godzilla does not like the symbiote on him. So he's fighting it and stuff, and Spidey eventually does some, I don't want to give all of it away of what he does and stuff, but he does go back to the red and blue Spidey. And because, of course, he's running around in his underwear and stuff because his symbiote suit's gone. So he's got to do something. But there's this one page difference where you go from Spidey in his undies to Spidey in a suit with extra weaponry on. It's like, so they do a little fun little notation in there of why that happened and how it happened so quick. But yeah, with what he gets, he helps try and get the symbiote off Godzilla, and then Godzilla fights the symbiote some and ends up kind of saying some things or grunting some things to Peter Parker and just kind of helping Peter out, and eventually, instead of just crushing him, because Peter helped get the symbiote off of Godzilla, and it was basically the way it sounded. Godzilla came to Manhattan because of the symbiote itself. It seemed like he was hunting that symbiote down. He knew something was wrong in the universe, and someone brought something from space, and that's how I took it. That's why he came, because when he could get away from the symbiote, he went back in the ocean and stuff. But yeah, it was fun. It was fun watching Mary Jane and Black Cat going back and forth with their little banter and their little picking on each other for both of them being Peter's relationships in the past and present. So yeah, that was really well done, and now I'm looking forward to checking out Godzilla vs. Hulk, even though this is the first one you should read. That definitely was a perfect standalone issue, so check it out if you like those characters.
Yeah, and for people's reference, talking about those, Godzilla versus the singular characters and stuff, we'll be talking about Godzilla versus Avengers as a club discussion once that issue is out and everybody has had a chance to read it. So I forget
Yeah.
I forget which ones I had ordered on the singular character ones, and I don't think I got them all, but like after the fact, I'm just like, I really should have just gotten them all. So next
Yeah, I wish
time,
I would have too.
yeah. So next time, whether I'm at Oh Yeah Comics or add on to my subscription order, I'll probably get them. Because
In the
that sounds cool.
beginning, they do have a flashback of Avengers versus Godzilla, Fantastic Four versus Godzilla, and stuff like that. Bits and pieces, news clips, and stuff like that they put together.
Very cool. All right, we are going to jump over to Katie. I'm very excited to hear your thoughts on your selection. What you got?
Yeah, so this week I checked out Empress by Mark Millar and Stuart Immonen. So this came out in 2017. It is published by, looks like it might be self-published by the Miller World and then Icon Comics. So Mark Millar is not one of my regulars that I read, but every time that I read his work, I'm always very, very impressed by it. So the complete creative team is Wade von Grawbadger doing the inking, Iva Silverchina is the colorist, Peter Doherty is the letterer and designer, and Nicole Boost is the editor. I really, really enjoyed this book. I just grabbed this at the West Bend Comic Con to, support the folks that were selling there. And basically, this is taking place a long time ago in some galaxy. Not sure if it's our galaxy or a different galaxy, but this is a sci-fi book. And basically, the premise is, all right, so humans have not been on Earth for a very long time, but what if there's other life in the galaxy that's been out there for longer than we can comprehend? And the main character, it's centered around a family of the Empress, her children. One's a teenager, one's a kid, one's a baby, and their bodyguard slash protector, Dane. And the Empress, her husband, is a very brutal dictator, warlord who in the galaxy the other being so scary that nobody wants to challenge him. So not a great guy, someone you'd imagine you have a hard time having a relationship with and feeling safe around. So she is planning to leave him. She's concocted this whole big scheme, and Dane is going to help her out. So they steal a little shuttle. And, the kids are kind of like, well, we want to go, but we don't want to go. The eldest daughter, she thinks very highly of her dad. She's not seen how cruel and violent he can be. So they steal a shuttle. They get confronted by, a pretty big freighter that says like, hey, like turn around now. And they're like, haha, actually you played directly into our scheme. And so then they get boarded by this police freighter and then hijack that freighter. And, we got some great space shoot 'em ups and explosions and space dogfights between, different factions. That's really fun. And they are they're going to meet up with one of Dane's old war buddies who has a ship that is kind of telepathically linked, and it can teleport people all throughout the galaxy. And of course, the Emperor is very angry about all of this, and he puts a bounty out on Dane and the Empress to try and get his kids back, but also it's because he can't handle really any challenges to his rule or his ego. It's a pretty dangerous world for our now fugitives who are bouncing around the galaxy on this ship that can teleport. Trying to find the name of the person that they are meeting up with. Like a lot of sci-fi, they meet up with friends along the way. Tor Blinder is the person who owns this teleporting ship called Ship. And they are bouncing from planet to planet, trying to always be just a step away from the Imperial guards and anyone who's coming after them. And it doesn't work great for them. They end up getting stuck on a planet during a sandstorm, and a group of slavers comes along and basically recognizes them and says, all right, we're taking the kids. And, the Empress and Dane can just float out in the vacuum of space for all we care. So the Empress is like, well, I have to get my kids back. They're the whole reason I did this. So they go and try and get the kids back. But meanwhile, the children, so the eldest daughter is named Ina, the middle child is named Adam, and then the baby is named Puck. Puck doesn't really do a lot in this whole book, but Adam is very mechanically inclined, and these slavers are not very smart folks, and they just kind of threw these kids in the junk room, which for someone who likes to tinker and build stuff is, just nirvana. So Adam is able to build a gadget to get them out and away from these slavers so that his parents can rescue them. And then it looks like everything is going to be safe. They travel to the Empress's old home planet where her sister still lives. And as we read this book, we don't know a ton about the Empress and her past. Part of the marriage agreement between her and the Emperor was, all right, your new life starts today. I don't want to hear about anything you did before. And, this is who you're going to be now. So it looks like they're going to be safe, but her sister and husband, brother-in-law have been body snatched by, at first I thought it was just a joke throughout this story. There's basically like timeshare salesman popping up being like, hey, you look like you could use a break at our Kez resort system, come to Kez resorts where you have a week of luxury. And I thought it was just kind of like a gag, but it actually played into the book where the sister had been body snatched by these Kez resorts folks, and it was another person inside her sister's body. They did like a soul swap kind of a thing. And so then they get turned into the Imperial Guard, and the Emperor is so mad. He's like, I'm coming there and I'm going to get them. And the daughter, gets into a disagreement with her mom. She's kind of, she sees her dad as her dad. She's had a hard time like seeing him as a whole person and what he has done. So she gets into a fight with her mom, calls her dad, says, hey, come get me. Well, he comes and he brings his Praetorian Guard and basically says, to the Empress, hey, if you don't come here and bring the kids like immediately, I will kill our daughter. And this is the moment for Ina where she realizes, oh, actually, like, I didn't understand what was going on, and I was being really, really very self-absorbed about all of this. And of course, she's terrified. Her world just got shattered. Her dad is like, yeah, I don't care if you live or die. And not only that, he's going to be the one to do it. So our heroes show up, they save the kids, and the Empress challenges the Emperor to combat. And so it seems like it's going to be doomed from the start. They're not going to win. But we find out in the past, the Empress was actually an expert gladiator fighter. So because the Emperor never really cared about her life or, who she was before they met, he didn't bother to ask like what her job was. Kind of throughout this whole book, she alludes to being like, oh, it wasn't very professional. So we think, okay, is she, doing something illegal? Nope, she was just a gladiator fighter and was very, very good at it. So she kicks the Emperor's butt in hand-to-hand combat. And then the royal line transfers over to Ina, the daughter. So she is given the commands, tells the soldiers to stand down. They claim the Emperor's flagship and fly off into the stars to have what looks like a happily ever after. And it's going to be a new age of peace for the galaxy. So I really, really liked this story. I want Mark Millar to write more of these books. I had Googled it and it sounded like there was going to be something. I don't know if it's come to fruition yet. I enjoyed everything about this. This has all the marks of a book. We have a space opera, we get time travel, we got kick-ass heroines who are out there, taking charge and solving problems. We got amazing landscapes. It's in space. I really, really enjoyed this, and I think you will too. Like I said, I don't read Mark Millar frequently, but when I do, I always really enjoy his stuff. The characters all look distinct and all the landscapes look distinct. I love the ships and the doodads. Really fun book. I liked this a lot. And, I just grabbed this just because, but high praise. I really enjoyed Empress, by Mark Millar and Stuart Immonen. Check it out and check out, other work by this team at Miller World. They've done a lot of work in the industry.
Yeah, I've probably talked about every kind of miniseries and series that he has done throughout the years. He did his stint at Marvel and DC of creating the biggest things that got, goes down in history. They get used, adapted to movies and TV, blah, blah, blah. And he got to himself to a point where he then just started doing nothing but creator-owned stuff to the point where he would very publicly say, hey, what Marvel and DC artist should I steal next for my next book? Basically pluck all these people out of the big two, giving them, the thing that they want to draw. Like when you describe this book saying it's got this, it's got that, it's got this, he's got series that have all of those individual things, literally kick-ass, as you mentioned, kick-ass, but like space and time travel, like Miller likes to work in so many different genres, and he writes in the stories always feel like very hyper. There's so much going on. They're very big. They're very grand. They're over the top. Sometimes people may be turned off by that, or you just may know that you're going to get, if you like that stuff, you're going to get that every single time you pick up a different book, regardless of the genre that you are reading. And it's always exciting because he always seems to just give his artists like the best thing to co-create and draw for their series. When you had talked about not knowing if there is any more, the downside of him doing so many things is that he is doing so many things. So things that we may want sequels for, we never get, but then it'll be a decade plus down the road and he'll come out with Nemesis again, volume 2.
Yeah.
Like he
Sure.
does these long time sequels to things. And I think Kirby talked about it. I've read them all off the podcast, but they did I think it was called The Big Game, where they did all of
Yeah.
took all of the Miller World properties and just met and basically did his Avengers style connected universe thing. And I forget if the
Such a
Empress
good concept.
yeah, I forget, if that character was part of that event or not, because there was once again so much going on and so much history of.
Yeah.
But so yeah. Anyways, if you like what you read
Yeah.
there, and you see the list of the titles and stuff that's advertised with his name and his artist, that there's a lot of other great, fun, original stories that even if we don't get sequels for, I think a benefit is that you get a very satisfying story, even if it is a small
Yeah.
chunk of 6 issues. And so
Yeah, I just
Yeah.
started picking up lots of Millar's work when I find complete runs of stuff, and it just knocked me out. It was awesome, and that's just pulled me right into anything else that he put out, and I haven't read anything bad yet.
I've
Yeah.
probably told this in the past, but I've met him a couple times, and then even to the point where he knew me online, followed me online, and when I brought it up in person at a meet and greet, I mentioned like, "Oh, I'm so and so," and I'm like, "I'm the one that you said you were jealous of because I have an arcade machine of Super Mario Brothers." And he
Mm.
goes, "Oh, like he's like, I always wanted one of those, or like my wife doesn't let me, or something, whatever the story was." But I just told him like, "Hey, you're the co-creator of all this stuff and blah blah blah." I'm like, "We can switch lives if you'd like. I mean, you can have
Yeah.
the arcade cabinet, which you can easily afford, or it's just and
Mhm.
and I'm like, I'll go ahead and be the co-creator on these books." So yeah, it's always
Mhm.
been kind of a fun in-person relationship as well, and everything that he's learned from the Marvel and DC Comics world, um, he definitely held on to that to create his own. Even though they're all meant to be separate universes at one point, then he just like, hey, this can all work together too. So
Mhm.
cool.
And just a blast writing these books. Like every page feels like the whole team wants to be there working together on this book. You don't always get that with the big two, and I could feel it. And I gotta tell you, if he is able to pick and choose who's working on his team and like what, I mean, that's the dream for a creative professional, because on the outside it always looks like, oh yeah, it's so cool. I get to, work with these amazing properties and I'm visiting New York and Los Angeles, but a fair amount of it is just humdrum work, and it's not always as much fun as you would think. So actually getting to dive headfirst into the fun stuff is super cool. And another thing I noticed is like I know he has had a lot of his creations optioned for movies or TV, and they haven't necessarily panned out for one reason or another. But this is what I want. Like, okay, this is a random side trip. Did you know that the Zack Snyder movie Rebel Moon on Netflix? Okay, I watched the first one and did not care for it on both a creative level and professional level. This is what I would have wanted from a movie like that. I'm like, this could actually be like a really awesome movie or TV series that you could do a lot with. And special effects like crazy. And I would pay so much money for this creative team, this specific creator team, to work on Star Wars books. This is actually what I want in a Star Wars book, and it leans a little more towards Battlestar Galactica, rather than Star Wars. There were elements of Dune within there. So well done, and I could see this being so successful in other things, and it made me want to see this adapted into other things. But yeah, really fun, a great read. probably pretty easy to get this trade paperback. So if it sounds interesting, check it out.
Yeah, when you're just talking about, obviously a big Star Wars fan that you are, my favorite
Hmm.
thing that Miller's ever done, he co-created Starlight, it's called, and
Oh yeah.
it was one of the rare properties that was optioned to the point where he was unable to play with it for that bigger universe connected thing, because
Hmm.
that was like the one that and Kick-Ass kind of fell into territory at the time where they
Hmm.
couldn't. Where he couldn't play around with it just due to rights and stuff. But that one, here's the quick synopsis because I think you might like this. 40 years ago, Duke McQueen saved an alien world from destruction. Back on Earth, nobody believed his story. Now his kids are grown, his wife has passed on, and his life has little to offer. Until the day a strange boy from the world he once saved makes an appearance, coaxing Duke to join him on one last adventure. Can Duke handle the leap from his has-been to hero? So it is dealing with space adventure and
Hmm.
wars and galaxies, blah blah blah. But Starlight is probably my top recommendation of things that
Okay.
it's not the same artist, but it is the same, Mark Millar.
Hmm.
But
Well, check that.
but yeah, and then what you mentioned about the things that panning through, because he had a huge deal with Netflix, and they were gonna like do all these
Yeah.
things, and then the I don't know, I can't think of the name, but they were releasing one of them, and then
Hmm.
Netflix really kind of bailed on it and kind of buried it, and it was kind of strange just how quickly like they
Yeah.
lost faith in it, and they had some of the other things happening, and I had just been so disattached from a lot of stuff, so I don't even know if those other things
Hmm.
happen. But anyways, that's a whole
Yeah.
other
Now
episode.
Netflix is like that where, they'll have a property that by all means should, be printing money hand over fist, go very, very well. And I tell you what, they find a way to either mess it up on the creative end or they let go of this amazing business opportunity and cancel a great show after 2 seasons. Yeah, I hear you.
Yeah, that Miller show that it was. Oh, the name was just
Wasn't it going to be the Magic Order? Like they
well.
hyped that book being like, oh, it's already in development for Netflix or
So that was
something.
going to happen. I don't even know if that came out because I probably would have seen it.
No.
There was another
Yeah.
one. It was a more superhero centric one that had Josh Duhamel was the star of it.
Hmm.
I can't think of the title of the book, but it was number one on Netflix opening weekend, and then they
Yeah.
just like canned it, and it's just like all right,
Yeah.
but whatever. Um, but his focus has always been with comics too. So even though he
Yeah.
dipped his toes in the Hollywood world, he always kept both feet into the comic book world because that's where the passion was. Where he's just like, "Yep, you people." He said that with Kick Ass, where he's like, "Hey, it's different than the book, but the director needs to tell their story. I told my story. He
Hmm.
takes it. He tells his. Blah blah blah." But anyways,
Hmm. Yes.
another episode of the Millar podcast world. So. Um, I'm going to talk about a book that may or may not have been
Uh,
influenced. Yes,
was it Jupiter's Legacy?
that's it. Yep, Jupiter's Legacy. Yep. They had like three different tiers of books. I forget what the other
Hmm.
Jupiter something that kind of dipped
Hmm.
into different periods of the superhero family throughout the generations. And yeah, really great series in comic book form as a whole. But yeah. Something that may or may not have been inspired by Kick Ass. We are talking about who are the Power Pals, number one. Washed up actors Derek and Alex have been best friends ever since playing teen superheroes Swallow and Buzzard in the 90s TV show Power Pals. Wait, you've never heard of it? Don't worry, you're not alone because it was canceled after 3 episodes. Ironically, on topic with what we were just talking about. But that small taste of fame left them hungry for more, and they've been trying to get back on the Hollywood train ever since. The synopsis goes for quite a while that pretty much tells you exactly what happened in issue one, so I will just cut to the creators. This is done by Dwayne Murray, Ahmed Rafat, and Rob Jones. So I picked this up because A was a number one. It caught my attention. Who are the Power Pals? And I asked myself, yeah, who are the Power Pals? I'm not familiar with the creative team. It's from Dark Horse. It had just some familiar visuals on the cover that was just like, all right, I'm intrigued. And then the synopsis kind of left me with like, all right, what if Batman 66 wasn't successful? That's what it kind of feels like, but then put it into a 90s timeline. And we get that these characters, these actors, played the Power Pals on TV. So you get some interesting panel work whenever you're cutting to old clips from the episodes of the 3 episode series of Power Pals. But then you are brought into the current time where they're essentially like security, like mall cop type people, but they're on kind of like a Warner Brothers type of set because you see a classic water tower. It's not Warner Brothers for legality purposes and for fictional storytelling. And it's them basically trying to get back into the industry. They're like, hey, we had this show back in the day. We want to stay relevant. They're out on acting jobs. They're meeting up with their acting agent who just kind of tells them that, nobody really cares about them. They're washed up and there's really nothing important. And Hollywood's doing this over here. You guys are not doing anything over there. And it leads to them kind of having kind of a bummer of an existence, having this, low level success, back in the 90s for this canceled show that nobody heard about. But they find themselves on like a kind of like a Hollywood Boulevard or like the Times Square when you see people making money by dressing up as superheroes or dressing up as
Mm-hmm.
Pikachu and things like that and taking selfies and, trying to get money from people for taking photos, blah blah blah. And you find themselves digging out their old costumes back from that 90s TV show and they're like, "Hey, let's go out on the street. These people are making money. We can dress up as our TV superheroes. Everybody's going to know who we are." Well, of course nobody still knows, Everyone's just lost to who they are. They get into a little scuffle, which was in the synopsis, because there's some other people that are kind of dressed up in some, superhero costumes that are kind of having a fight over, people taking pictures. So they kind of stand up for these, for this family, for these tourists that are kind of being hounded for money and stuff. And they're like, hey, we played these superheroes on TV. Let's be the superheroes now.
Ooh.
But only one of them has that idea where the other guy really has nothing to do with it. So that is kind of the setup for this issue. Um, it had elements of Kick-Ass, the classic story of, hey, we read comic books and watch TV and movies in our world. Wouldn't that be fun to go do it? Crimson Cowl Media, David Gloyd was part of the real life superhero movement, which dealt with doing some in street patrols, doing a lot of charity work and stuff in the Milwaukee area, doing a lot of good and kind of being fueled by the love for superheroes and comics. You get that sort of vibe in with this book, but then it has just a very interesting twist and just the angle of how they started as superheroes on TV. So it's a nice little twist to it. Gave a little something new. It didn't 100%, feel like this or that. It brought in its own little thing, and so I think that accurately describes it. If you take like, what if the Batman 66 show wasn't successful? It was in the 90s, and now these guys, if it was Adam West and Burt Ward, just being like, hey, let's try to reclaim our fame. But it's kind of like a what if story. What if Adam West Batman didn't wasn't popular? So yeah, definitely a very promising first issue. I didn't pre-order the other one just because I wanted to do a first issue taste test, but I think I would find myself picking up the other. I don't know if it's a mini series or not, but this was a very solid issue for fans of superheroes and for fans of people reading about fans of superheroes being inspired by them. Kirby?
From Ahoy Comics, I got the Toxic Avenger pinup special one shot. This guy seems pretty interested in Toxie's butt as they're at the urinals there. You get the unedited picture in this book. And for a mutated creature, he's got a pretty tight butt. It is a pinup special, but it's done the right way where it has a nice little short story in it by Matt Borders, Fred Harper, Lee Luridge, and Rob Steen. Which Lee Luridge keeps popping up today also.
Yeah, we can.
But we got Taxi's wannabe girlfriend. She wants to kind of make out with him, kind of start a relationship, but he's ignoring her. If you're used to the original Toxic Avenger, his girlfriend was blind, and this girl is not blind, so they're changing things up a little bit. Look at Taxi's a little bit more goofier, which made it hard for me to get through the original 5 issue run that they did, but I ended up liking the character more and more every issue I read. And in here, he's trying to help a friend and can't go to the bathroom because his toilet's full of toxic, who knows what. And Toxie shoves his hand in there and pulls out a giant mutated female rat, and then a bunch of rat babies come out of the toilet. And they have to deal with them. And in the end, there's one tiny little special rat character that's left that he ends up keeping as a pet for now. But then they realize how much of a pain it is to raise another character. But yeah, it was fun. She keeps hitting on him to try and get together and make out at least, and he's worried about things that could happen because he has no idea what's in his body with toxic waste and all that stuff. So you don't want to contaminate her in any way, shape, or form. But it's a fun little story about that. And then we get the teaser for the Taxi team up. The first one's Taxi and Jesus. I got that issue coming. They're doing I think a 4 or 5 issue run with different team ups with Taxi. I love this. I hope this is what the characters are going to look like. But here's a little
And you just froze for a little
anime
bit.
characters.
Now you're back. Yep, and you froze a little bit again. If you can hear me, and you are back.
Okay, yeah, I was afraid of that. But yeah, there's some Toxic Avenger.
Ooh, that's awesome. And you froze again here, and it seems to happen when you put up the book. I don't know if that has any coincidence to it, but yeah, right now, if you can hear us, this is the longest you've been frozen. Kirby's holding up an awesome double splash page of the lineup here. So, yep, Kirby, if you can hear us, this is the longest you've been frozen, both audio and video. And we're just standing by. I assume, Katie, you're experiencing the same thing I am? Okay.
Yes, I am.
This is future Anthony letting me know when I scrub through the video to know where it is. Okay, you're back now that you put the book down, and he's gone. All right.
No.
So to me, it felt like every time you held it up, it seemed like the internet was working hard to. Okay, and he's back.
Yeah, it totally shut down there for a second and restarted.
So it was either a coincidence, but every time you kind of really held up something, it started to freeze, and that was the longest one. But you're back now.
Okay, well, they have a bunch of pinups throughout the book, and then I don't want to give them all away. Yeah, I don't want to really show the real version of his cover, but they have a good variety of different, all by different artists and stuff. And then they have a write up in here that basically gets you caught up on. Oh, there's a little goofy story that they have about how basically putting your life on the line is like currency in this new world and stuff. A goofy story like that. But they also give you a story that tells you a little bit about Lloyd Kaufman, tells you about who's working on the future Toxic Crusaders things. There's a Toxic movie that's coming out and all that stuff. So you get all that information in here too. So that was nice. But yeah, you want a little fun story, goofy story with Taxi and some goofy pinups. There you go. Check that out. But they are doing a full on who knows how many issues run, they mention also in that story, in that write up. So check it out.
Yeah, it's kind of a cool way, kind of what you mentioned there, where not only a pinup special where it's just the art, that they actually have a story thrown in there too. So that's always
Yeah, it's fun to have a little something extra.
cool. So yeah, that is going to do it then for this episode, issue number 327 proper. So once again, go back to our last episode in the feed, and especially on the YouTube, because that one stays online forever. The iTunes feed gets recycled after 10 or 12 episodes or so due to the free account. But we had a creator interview with David Gloyd and Ara Marcone talking about their comic books, 3 different comic books, one that they worked on together, and then ones they worked on separately. But we talked about that in a Creator Club interview. To advertise other things real quick for plugs, crimsoncowl.com for info and original webcomics. iTunes, Crimson Cowl Comic Club. Write a review, rate, and all that fun stuff. Share, tell a friend. If you're listening to the audio and they're like, hey, I want to see these pictures. Kirby was talking about Toxic Avengers, butt and whatever, If you want to get a little tease, a censored version of that, go on YouTube, subscribe to Crimson Cowl Comic Club over on YouTube to find out about that. Looking at the credits here, Under the Cowl of MS, Kirby, you are getting back into the swing of things here. Can you kind of tell people what's going on with Under the Cowl of MS?
Yeah, I'm finally back on some live shows. I've been doing some reviews for Anarch Press and trying to get some other reviews out there for some other creators. So I am back up and running, and hopefully by next week I'll have my regular shows going again. So probably by the time we get this episode out, I'll be back running full speed ahead.
Excellent. So subscribe to Under the Cowl of MS wherever you get your podcasts and over on YouTube and all across social media. All of that fun stuff. I host Cartoonist by Night. It's a YouTube drawing show with my friends. But yeah, by this episode, there'll definitely be out. Our latest episode is with writer Dave Scheid. Dave is part of the All Yeah Comics community. He's the author, co-creator of Mayor Good Boy, which I have praised here on this podcast. Co-creator of Wrapped Up, bunch of stuff, and he even dipped his toes into the Star Wars world at Free Comic Book Day. He's done some Trolls comics. He's got to work with some Nickelodeon properties. But he's a friend of ours. He is exclusively our first writer, solely writer on the episode. And we talked about video games. So we learned all about Dave and his creative career with writing and his love of video games as well as horror movies. And then we learn all about our favorite video games and draw video game related stuff. It was a super cool episode to talk about that. So Cartoonist by Night over on YouTube. I have some art accounts, Anthony Laatsch, Laatsch, on Instagram and Facebook. And the last little plug here, my next show will be, I got to get back to my note here, July 19th, Saturday, July 19th. I'll be a guest at Comicopolis in Lockport, Illinois, a very popular library show. I've got some friends that are setting up there. It is the first time that I've had to be vetted to be accepted into a show, so it was exciting to submit an application, show proof of my work, and explain who I am, and then sit there for a couple days wondering if I was good enough or not, and then get the acceptance letter saying, hey, we want you at Comicopolis. So I'm excited to see what all the fuss is about when looking at all of the pictures over the last couple of years and seeing people being very excited, not only to table at the show, but to attend the show. Looks like they just have a big extravaganza of doing a lot of stuff, having inside artists, having outside artists as well, under some tents. I'll be there on the outside tables. In the past, they've had a lot of activities. I've seen some pop culture cars in the lineup and stuff like that. Comic creators like Gene Ha are there. Some of our friends that we've talked to on this very show and Cartoonist by Night will be there. I'm very excited for what could possibly be one of the biggest exposures that I'll have with bringing Rice Christopher and my art into Illinois through Comicopolis, Saturday, July 19th. I'm excited to go there. And I think that is going to do it then for all of the plugs. If you want to buy my comics, latchkeykid@gmail.com, Laatsch, latchkeykid gmail.com. That's going to do it for this episode. Tell a friend, subscribe to the show, send a comment. All of that will help the show. This whole time, this was the outro I had for our last episode that I didn't use. So here we go. This whole time, I've been monitoring the halls.
Want to see a toxically mutated symbiote Zilla.
And I've been trying and failing to out Pizza the Hut.
To be continued.
Thank you, Slimer.